Hey, folks, this is Mark Devine with the Unbeatable Mind podcast. Welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation with Steven Kotler, one of my favorite authors and breakthrough artists to help us all kind of perform at our peak and tap that peak potential, operating the flow state. Author of Stealing Fire, an outstanding book that you need to read if you haven't. Before we get into Steven and our conversation, I just wanted to mention that California government willing, it's kind of like saying inshallah, government is the new, inshallah, government willing. We are planning to have our Seal Fit events in March, as well as our Unbeatable Mind experience in March. Now, we're expecting to have some challenges with it, so be patient. We are planning on, using all testing protocols and making sure everyone's safe and that we have a safe event. But who knows? They might just flat out make it illegal for us to do it. So just stand by on that. But right now it's all systems go. And if the Unbeatable Mind experience has a similar fate, then we will definitely be doing a virtual Unbeatable Mind experience that we did September. And it was a phenomenal event, really. It was quite profound to see everyone in the tribe experiencing virtually what we do, what we're doing live. And then the live event, we will have a very small team of our Tip of the Spear members there participating in all the immersive embodied training of the Unbeatable Mind operating system. So check out unbeatablemind.com if you're interested in getting out of the house and doing something challenging in March. I appreciate that. So like I said, Steven, I first met Steven a few years ago with, actually, I think I've interviewed you a few times, or a couple times, right? And also your partner in the Flow Genome Project, Jamie Wheel, Steven. And you had the Flow Genome Project. And I remember even missing an opportunity to go skiing with you and a bunch of peak performers up at in Eden, Utah, at Powder Mountain. And really pushing the envelope with this idea of flow. And now you've gone beyond that. You're still working, I imagine, on that project because it's an never-ending bastion of opportunity and research. But we've gone beyond that to really look at what we were just talking beforehand, kind of the rest of the story, and that flow is just one kind of side of performance. And your new book, which comes out as we're recording this today, is called The Art of the Impossible. Super stoked. So can you give us, without getting into all the nitty-gritty detail right away about some of your discoveries, just a little bit of the backstory on what you learned with Flow, the Flow Genome Project, Stealing Fire, some of the biggest aha moments, and then also what was missing that led you to this current trajectory.
So Mark, one thing, Flow Genome Project, old project, left it a bunch of years ago, started the Flow Research Collective to focus really predominantly on the neurobiology of flow. Jamie was doing a lot of other things with the Flow Genome Project that weren't really what I was doing. So I left and have been working with the Flow Research Collective, which I started. And sort of this book came out of work I did with the Flow Genome Project and with the collective. And it was this idea that flow, if you go back to the 90s, right, a little bit of history, it was tough to train. Like we had the psychology, and best in the world, psychologist-wise, we're trying to use those ideas to train people how to get into flow, make it reliable and repeatable. And that's
can we pause a few points here? Shishmahal didn't really talk about training flow. He just talked about it happening as a result of certain kind of circumstances.
So he didn't in flow, but the training flow, I think Susan Jackson, who wrote Flow in Sports with Mike, I think Susan, she was a coach, a sports coach in Australia, and had worked with really high caliber college and Olympic athletes for a long time. And I think she started in terms of that's sort of where it started. It also, there were a ton of people with Csikszentmihalyi High being involved, though he didn't write about this until really last year. He put out a textbook on the subject. There were a ton, simultaneously, there were a ton of educational experiments trying to train up flow in students. Last year, 2 years ago, Csikszentmihalyi High finally published a textbook, Flow in Education, that talks about a lot of this work. So there's a lot of testing and trying with it. Nobody was super successful. And my work has always been on the neurobiology. And I always, the reason the neurobiology is interesting to me is it's mechanism. Psychology is often metaphor, and the neurobiology, if you can get things down to the kind of the basic, shaped by evolution, present in all humans, biology, you have something that scales, you have something that works for everyone, and etc. And so that was a lot of the work that I did first at the Flow Genome Project and then at the Flow Research Collective. And we found, using the exact same psychometric instruments that Susan Jackson developed, she was measuring flow with back in the day when they weren't very good at it, we could get a 70% boost in flow in most people. This is because the neurobiology of flow's triggers has been done over the past 15 years, which they didn't have in the 90s at all. And a lot of different people have contributed to this work. But using it, you can make the experience very reliable and repeatable. And that's amazing because flow is optimal performance. But it turns out it's not stable. Right. You get this huge spike. You can have a very severe return to baseline. This is sort of flow, politely put, as the most addictive experience on earth.
Yeah, that's why people keep chasing it, because when they leave it behind, it's gone, and then you have to chase again. Before we kind of like tackle that, what are the some of the predictors of flow, or the measurements that tell us that we're in a state of flow?
So predictors are there are 22 triggers, preconditions that lead to more flow. There is work done on a flow-prone personality also. So I didn't know what you meant by predictors. So I wasn't clear there. Okay. But let me start with sort of the psychological definition, so we know what we're talking about. Flow is it's defined as an optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. And more specifically, when psychologists describe it, they describe a state that produces 6 core characteristics: phenomenological experiences, how the state makes us feel, complete concentration in the task at hand, the merger of action and awareness, the diminishment of our sense of self, time dilation, which means time passes strangely. It's an autotelic experience, which is to say it's very, very addictive. And we have a sense of performance skyrockets so much. We have the sense of control over forces that we normally can't control. So that's how psychologists define and measure flow. So earlier I was talking about Susan Jackson's psychometric instrument. All it is those characteristics on a Likert scale. In this experience, how much did your self vanish from not at all to that kind of thing?
How much did your experience of time dilate?
Right, exactly. That's what we're doing. And the good news about that the bad news about that diagnostic is it's a self-reported diagnostic, and all of those have to be sort of paused.
What about the neurobiology? Are you able to test?
Yeah, so the neurobiology, which is the work that I've really been involved in, has galloped forward. Even I think the first time we spoke was from my book, The Rise of Superman. We sort of talked about what we knew at the time. Flow has 5 neurochemicals, pleasure chemicals, that are associated with its production. We know that brain waves drop down to the alpha theta borderline. We know that there's transient hypofrontality, meaning there's large deactivations across the prefrontal cortex in the state. And we sort of started to understand that why. Fast forward to where we are today, and my lab right now and my team, we're working, and it's going to come out later this year, but we're working on a paper on the neural dynamics of flow, the networks involved in the production of this state. And it's gotten to the point that the physiology has advanced so much that there's a heart rate variability signature for flow. There's a cortisol signature for flow. In fact, more research needs to be done. One of the more interesting findings is that your frown muscles appear to be paralyzed or less functional in flow, which is not, by the way, so that's not what you think it is. It's not that you can't be unhappy in flow, though that's true because of all the pleasure chemicals. Frowning is a measure of effort. And so flow is this feeling of effortless effort, right? So when you're frowning, when those muscles are really tense, it just means I'm exerting myself, right? But in flow, even though you are exerting yourself in just a high energy state and you're burning a lot of energy, it doesn't register on your face. Your frown muscles appear semi-paralyzed and your smile muscles are hyperactive. There's more work that needs to be done on that yet. I love that. But yeah, the work has really advanced in the paper that we're working on, and who knows what's true or not because it's not out yet. Other people have to beat on it. But we've got 4 different measurable signals that appear to show up at the onset of flow. So that if any of those turn out to be accurate, this is great. Now we have a handful of physiological, neurobiological, measurable markers that will say, hey, you're now in flow, which will be fantastic.
So as we get wearables that are more sensitive to these things, then you could literally have an alert, pop up in your watch or something.
We're working,
entering flow.
Yeah, we're working on a biophysical-based flow detector that will give us that in a lab. I think what we're going to get is something of an app that basically says, you're here, do these things to move towards. First.
What are the 4 signals, by the way?
Pardon me?
The 4 signals that you want to measure.
Well, so one is, I don't know if this is true across the board, so I don't want to talk about a lot of them because the paper's not out yet, but one of them is work. We've been doing some of this in conjunction with Dr. Andrew Huberman, Stanford, who I'm sure you know.
I know.
And so Andrew and his lab helped decode the fight response. We used to think the fight and the flight response were the same response, and they were both in the amygdala. He said he did some work that shows no, the fight response is actually separate. Fleeing and freezing is in the amygdala, the sort of the dangerous detector of the brain. But there's in the thalamus, which is sort of the routing center of the brain, that appears to be where the fight response lives. And we believe you may have to trigger that response even for like a millisecond at the front edge of a flow state, which is why, by the way, when I do bother doing respiration stuff, one of the things I like using is box breathing, because having to focus through that, when you exhale all the air out of your lungs and it's more than 7 seconds, you tend to panic, right? Fight or flight. And you have to use that energy to focus through and have a real slow inhale on the other side of it. And I find that's tremendous training for this particular point.
It's interesting you say that, because we've been teaching our big 4 skills as a flow activator, meaning that when you train them and you get good at them, they activate flow on demand, the experience of flow. Of course, we approach all this just from pure experiential.
And I think
study of n equals 1.
And I think there's a lot in box breathing. Box breathing is like we train different things. There's different kinds of mindfulness things for different situations. I personally use box breathing 95% of the time when I'm doing mindfulness work, because I think it does all the stuff general mindfulness does. And it's this extra having to focus through the panic, I find really important. And that was actually, I was in conference. I was talking to JT Holmes, who Red Bull Air Force, I'm sure you know JT a little bit, when I was writing Rise of Superman. And he was talking about specifically the thing that they did in Transformers 3, that it was the most difficult base jump base jump and wingsuit flying anybody had ever done. And he was talking about how you had to focus through the panic of launch to actually drop into flow. Otherwise, really bad things happened. And that was when I started thinking about this kind of more frequently. And, we started to see that a bunch of the neurobiology started to support this, but, way more work has to be done. But I think your intuition and our research is pointing in the exact same direction with some of this stuff.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts coming up. One is, it does make sense, Andrew's research, because freezing and fleeing are passive postures. I mean, fleeing, you could say, is it's fear-based, whereas they're both fear-based. Whereas when you step into action, it requires courage, right? And so in a sense, you have to tap into your courage, a system.
Well, and by the way, that's exactly,
which is going to be a different system than your fear-based system.
It's a different system. And so here's something really weird. This is not Huberman's work. This is work that was really done a long time ago, but this is in this crazy experiment done by this crazy neuroscientist, where they were I want to say it was just 2 subjects. It was done like in the 70s. They let them self-stimulate any area of the brain they wanted. And this was the area, the fight response. And the funny thing is, if you ask them what you feel when you stimulate the fight response, it feels bad. It physically feels bad.
Well, because you're poking the fear dragon.
But we love the feeling because we associate it with courage. And that's exactly it. And so the point of this experiment, obviously more work has to be done, but it seems like that feeling of courage, of stepping into,
stepping off,
is is one of our favorite feelings. And, certainly all peak performers quickly figure that one out,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. And the other thing that comes to my mind is just how, I love Western science because, Westerners just don't believe anything that's not backed by science. But I first came across this idea of flow in my martial arts training when we combined Zen with martial arts back in 1985, without any kind of reference, material, without ever having reading Mikhail or anything about flow, not knowing anything. But my Zen master talked about the concept of shibumi.
sure. Also,
And
a very bad book by Eric von Lustenberger.
yeah, right. I don't think I read it, but just the idea, the concept of
Not
shibumi.
bad book, just very overtly sexual. Let's just say
really?
that. Yeah, very,
oh yeah,
like,
no,
right,
exactly. I know exactly what you're talking
you
about.
Want, if you want a lot of sex with your martial arts fighting,
right.
That's the book for you.
The razor blade, right?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to find a teacher. Enough said.
Enough said. I think what did the Russians call it? Red Dragons, right?
Right.
Right.
So this idea of effortless perfection, and that came after a long period of practice. Like in the SEALs, crawl, walk, run, crawl, walk, run, crawl, walk, run, and all of a sudden, 15 to 20 years later, you have these, you're able to operate. Maybe 10 years, I don't know. Gladwell said 10,000 hours. I think that can be shortcutted radically with effective training, and I'm sure you agree with that. But you'd then enter this peak experience flow state. You'd be able to effortlessly flow, effortlessly perform, with almost perfect execution, without too much thought, because you're beyond thought. So that was really fascinating to me, and I love how the ancient masters from yoga and the martial arts traditions and other traditions have found this as a result of development, right? As a result of development.
I want to point out,
mind, body, spirit level.
I want to point out that I think everything you just said in a certain level. So when people read The Art of Impossible, it's the full suite, right? And I like to say peak performance is nothing more or less than getting our biology to work for us rather than against us. Mm-hmm. That's what The Art of Impossible. Flow is a part of that biology, but there's other components. My point here is, when any peak performers read this book, as a general rule, a ton of this stuff is familiar. Right. Of course it is, because that biology is a limited toolkit. This is the same reason those Zen masters and the ancients came to these same conclusions, because there's a limited number of things we can optimize in the human body. They work in a specific way. And this is not new information in a sense, but one of the ideas in The Art of Impossible that I think hasn't showed up in a scientific way before is there's an order and a sequence to all this stuff. Right. Because we evolved to do it in a specific way millions of years ago, and it's still the way the systems work. And so I think there's a lot of commonality. If you can strip out kind of the socio-political, cultural stuff that's in all the traditions, whatever they are, and just get down to the technologies. Yeah. The technologies are very, very, very similar.
They are, I agree. We called that stripping the foo out of the kung fu. Yeah. And the technologies include practices that everyone's listening is familiar with.
Yeah, right? Of course.
Movement, mindfulness, concentration, arousal control, meditation, to use the deepest sense of that term. One of my developmental models for flow has been from the ancients, and that's, Patanjali's 8 limbs or 8 stages. And it really works. It's profound. So at the foundational level, and by the way, these 8 stages I'm going to go through real quick because I don't want to steal your thunder anymore. I want to get into it, but they all kind of work together. So you're working them all the time, but then they kind of unfold in this linear, holistic, transcendent, include manner. And the first 2 are like the ethical precepts and your disciplines. Basically getting the biology of your body, squared away, balanced, pure, de-stressed, clean eating, discipline, all that kind of stuff. And then also how you orient your life to others so that you're in harmony, you're cultivating peace. And some people think that's the penultimate end state, because those are, the ethical precepts of religions are based upon those, but those are the foundation of living a life in flow. And then came physical movement, exercise, and yogis would call that asana. Then came breath work, pranayama. Then came deepen your sense of sensory perception, sensory awareness, pratyahara, then concentration training. And then we open up into mind meditation, which I believe they meant really mindfulness. It's their kind of depth psychology phase. And then the stages of integration, right? Or union, samadhi, which is flow, right? Every experience of samadhi they talk about is a different level of flow, but then they're also including burning off, karmic energy and moving more toward, highest evolution or enlightenment. But it's fascinating, again, so it depends on how you look at it, but that is a complete model from my perspective, because it's worked with me, and we have aspects of that built into our Unbeatable Mind program. What do you think about that as a training, developmental curriculum, so to speak?
I'd have to really look at what's under the hood. What I can tell you, what resonated immediately. So what the science shows, and this is sort of the order followed in the Art of Impossible, is that, first of all, the path of peak performance always starts. You got it, like, to get in the game, there's positive psychology says there's 6 basics, right? There's 3 things that are on the physical side of the equation that tune up our energy levels, and 3 things on the mental side of the equation that keep our anxiety levels down, because anxiety is such a block on peak performance. Right. And that sort of resonates with a little bit of where they restrict clean eating, right? And I mean, this is sleep 7 to 8 hours a night, good hydration, good nutrition, get good social support, right? Surround you, have conversations with people who love you and, you care about. And then on the cognitive side, it's daily gratitude practice, mindfulness, respiration practice, or regular exercise. Those are the 3 best ways to regulate the nervous system, right? So we're all starting the same place. And then this is where it's interesting also, is what the science shows is once you sort of like got that sort of done, you have to start with motivation, because it's the energy that gets you into the game. And the research is really clear that you got to start with sort of extrinsic, outside yourself money, meaning you just got to be able to take care of your bills. Safety and security needs are foundational, right? If you're not paying your bills and rent, like, you're going to produce too much anxiety for peak performance, right? But once that's done, where do you go? And this is exactly where they were going. You got to start with your big 5 intrinsic motivators. Curiosity, which is designed biologically to be built into passion. Passion is designed biologically to be extended into purpose, right? Your passion coupled to a cause greater than yourself. Once you have purpose, what does the science show? You need autonomy, the freedom to pursue your purpose. And then what do you need? Mastery, the skills to pursue your purpose well. That's how, right? So in a sense, and by the way, if you're doing that right, you're sort of what you were talking about with ethics, you just are trying to line up all your intrinsic motivators. And the way that you peak performance athletes, they stack fuel sources, right? And you'll have proteins, you'll have carbs, lots of hydration, lots of fats, etc. You want to stack internal fuel sources: curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, mastery, and you want them all pointed in the same direction. Because as you know, the peak performance is hard. I mean, life in general is hard. Peak performance is challenging as well, and you need all the help you can get. So you want all your intrinsic motivators pointing in the same direction. You want your nervous system functioning optimally and your body to be able to produce the desired energy. Absolutely. Right. Where it goes from there is interesting. They went into exercise, and what the research shows is, by the way, once you get to that point, by the way, you sort of line up your intrinsic motivators. It seems like goal setting is next. But once that happens, once those things are taken care of, the system will start generating more flow, which is good, because that's when you have to start training grit, which sounds like the physicality that they were doing, but that's what the science shows. And it shows 6 levels of grit that need to be trained. And they all, in the end, they all sort of blur together. But in the beginning, you got to train each one independently, it appears.
Interesting.
So a lot of that is very similar. What comes next is we'd have to go into way more detail about what comes next to see how it maps onto the stuff I was writing about, what the science seems to be pointing at. The other thing that I always say is everybody's going to be a little individual, right? You're going to have
just going to go
there.
It's really a personalized thing too. You said, there might be people who are prone to flow. It's because there's certain people. The yogi's talking about the 4 doshas, the 4 body types, or 3, right? Sattva-rajic, and I can't remember the last one.
I'm not going to be any help for you here.
Right, Ragistic, which is basically like there's three types of people. You're either lethargic, you're either or super athletic, or you're kind of in between and peaceful, you know, yogi. So at some level, like where and even the meditation traditions, you know, in the ancient days said, you know, okay, come and we'll basically evaluate you for a year. So go wax on, wax off, sit, you know, clean the floor, wash your plates, be in the community, and then we'll figure out what your personality needs in order to activate motivations so that you can train. Otherwise, if I just give you the one size fits all practice, you'll fail, likely, possibly. You have a 33% chance of failure.
Yeah, you know, the way I talk about it is, and this is a thing we say a lot at the Flow Research Collective. It's a lesson I really learned the hard way in my life for sure. But personality doesn't scale, biology scales. And like the problem is that like too often in this world that both you and I kind of live in, somebody figures out what works for them and teaches it to other people. Right. And it's a freaking disaster. It just ruins lives. Right. And this is the dread trap of peak performance. And I'll tell you a true story, but this is me. You learn a little bit about peak performance, wherever that is, couple years in, 2-3 years, your life is working and your friends' lives are broken and you want to fix them. You got to fix them and right. Or they come to you for help. And in my case, I had written my first book on flow. I had a column for Psychology Today, right? Like I had some credit.
You were the expert.
Right. I was, and people came to me and I hadn't learned this lesson yet. And I told them what works for me. And the thing that you have to know is that, like, first of all, I covered action and adventure sport athletes for a living. And those guys,
a rare breed.
They're not nearly dying like once every 2 weeks. They're not doing their job. And I was an investigative journalist, you know, and if investigative journalists aren't, you know, nearly dying once every 3 months, they're not doing their job, right? I mean, this was just normal. Like literally we used to this, you know, you'll get this as a SEAL, but we used to have a joke, which was like most people call it trauma. We call it Monday.
Right.
Right. And right. And I mean, it was just so like my risk tolerances were off the crazy chart. Right. I've got risk tolerances that are so far from normal. Mm-hmm. And so risk tolerances are essentially genetically hardwired and set up by early childhood experience. That's a personality thing, right? Like mm-hmm. same as where you are on the introversion extroversion scale. Mm-hmm. Now, these are things that I have to know to teach you how to, like, what peak performance stuff works for you. You got to know these things, mm-hmm. right? And if you don't, of the 5 or 6 friends I can remember trying to help, put one in the hospital, nearly caused a divorce in another's life. One guy didn't speak to me for 5 years. Another person has still not spoken to me, and on and on. Personality doesn't scale.
What did you have these guys base jumping, or you know?
We are not going to go into the faulty techniques of yesteryear. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was stupid. And biology, that's why you want to go back to sort of the core biology. This is how it works, and then go run your own damn experiment in your own life. Totally right? Agree with that. Like yeah. I can tell you how it works, and that's great, and that's a basic knowledge to work from, and then you got to just figure out how does it work for you best.
Right. What are your thoughts on helping people get curious? You know, because everyone's freaking distracted. Everyone is obsessed with the fear-based news cycle and politics and COVID, and then here comes the art of impossible, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I don't have time. Or how do I get motivated? You know, I mean, I'm serious. This is a real issue these days, as you're well aware. I mean, I had one of my not my yoga teachers, but one of the yoga teachers, this is tragic, at the studio in our town, which we have tons of them, but the studio I used to train at, Core Power. I mean, she's been shut down and out of a job, and she was isolated. She was a beautiful yogi, and she committed suicide 2 weeks ago. I mean, this is happening. It's real in our society.
Yeah, dude, I just paid the rent for a friend of mine's martial arts dojo yesterday. I get it for the same thing.
So how do we get curious so that we can get off of our dead center and get back into our true center and to move forward so we can tap into this art of the impossible theory and practice?
from a total dead stop is an interesting question. And we've been doing a lot of work since this kind of start of COVID on this. Some of this is woven into the art of impossible. Some of it is not, but there's two things. So one, curiosity, people cultivating curiosity, the neurochemicals underneath curiosity, dopamine and norepinephrine, will get your engine moving. But all you have to do, like, you got to remember what we mean. Like, so if you want to, for example, how do you turn curiosity into passion? What's that about? How, right? The way you start is, the way I have people start is make a list of 25 things you're curious about. And by curious, all I mean is if time stopped and you had a free 48 hours, you could devote it to anything, you would watch a couple of movies on a subject and read a book or two and have a conversation or two with an expert, right? And try to learn something about it. That's all you start with, right? It's not a huge deal. What passion is literally the ability to find the intersection of multiple curiosities, right? Say you're interested in football, by the way, and say you're interested in nutrition, right? Those are, by the way, categories that are too broad to be useful for this exercise. You want to be as specific as possible. So instead of football, you're interested in what does it take to play left tackle? And instead of nutrition, you're interested in insects as a food source. Then what does the intersection look like? Well, left tackle is an energy intensive position. Do insects make a good protein food for playing left tackle? And play there for a little while. 20 minutes a day, a little bit at a time. The thing about curiosity and cultivating curiosity, the way the biology is designed to work is a little bit at a time, right? We get really impatient in the modern world. We all want it right here, right now, but the system is designed to work kind of slowly. Curiosity, because basically you want to think about it this way. Everybody wants passion these days, but nobody, you don't want to be 2 years into your passion to discover, oh shit, it's only a phase. That's really right, demotivated. That's a problem. But so what you basically find places your curiosities intersect and play there 20 minutes a day, day after day after day after day after, build up experience. Slowly, those little play sessions will start generating more dopamine, more norepinephrine. When those things in our system, by design, dopamine is designed to make us want to make meaning out of things, to link cause and effect. Norepinephrine is literally curiosity itself, that feeling of I want to know more. It's designed to feed itself. You just have to start somewhere and show up, right? More than anything else, the system will do it. You just have to show up and do the little bit of work of figuring out. And so we took the opening of the book, How to Turn Curiosity into Passion and Passion into Purpose, and did a webinar and created an interactive workbook off of it. It's called The Passion Recipe. So if people want to go to the www.passionrecipe.com, that's our exercise for doing that. The other thing I will tell you is reboot your primary flow activity. So what the hell did I just say? Everybody's got.
First, you got to figure out what that is.
Well, so let's talk about that. Everybody's got a primary flow activity. And it is that thing that, just think about it this way. You've been doing something over the course of your life that every time you do it, 90% of the time, you just lose yourself in the thing. Now, this could be, my thing was skiing. Some people it's dancing to hip hop. Some people it's walking the dog in the woods. Some people it's riding horses, writing speeches, take your pick, martial arts. You want to double down on that. And the research shows 4 hour, like an afternoon a week. You could split that up any way you want, but that will work. And the reason you want to double down in your primary flow activities when you're cultivating curiosity is, one, all the neurochemicals you're sort of looking for will show up in flow. But there's 3 real reasons. As we move into flow, first of all, there's a global release of nitric oxide, right? It flushes stress hormones out of your system. So it resets the nervous system. And anxiety blocks curiosity. Anxiety and curiosity are essentially the same cocktail. They're both underpinned by norepinephrine. Many mammals can't feel both at once. It's an either or, not my research, Temple Grandin's research. But so cows cannot feel curiosity and anxiety at the same time. It goes back and forth.
How do they figure that out? Do they give cows a survey?
So this is all Temple Grandin's work, and she writes about a lot of this in Animals in Translation. So it's a great book, phenomenal book if you want to take a look at it. But humans can, right? But the easiest way to kind of turn one into the other is you can transform anxiety into curiosity. Often, by the way, people can't tell the difference between anxiety and curiosity in their system. Like they think they're feeling anxiety, and it could be curiosity or excitement. Anyways, flow will reset your nervous system, so it'll make space for more curiosity. First of all, second of all, when flow is essentially a focusing skill, right? It's not quite like mindfulness, but it's similar. And like any skill, right? The more you do it, the more you do it. So like if people want more flow in their life at work, go double down on your primary flow activity. The best thing I can do for flow in my life at work is ski a couple times a week. Also, the big boost in motivation and productivity that shows up in flow seems to outlast the flow state, as does the heightened creativity. And it's a huge spike in creativity, 400 to 700%, depending on whose numbers you're looking at. And Teresa Mabel at Harvard figured out that heightened creativity will outlast the flow state by a day, maybe two. So by doubling down on your primary flow activity and just rebooting it. And the reason I'm mentioning this is in times of crisis, right? In general, in adult life, like, we put away childish things. We stop surfing, we stop skiing, we stop all that stuff for our responsibilities. It's a disaster from a performance standpoint. But to make it worse, coming through the year that we just all had, right, where the crisis became a triple crisis kind of thing for all of us, most people have totally stopped those kinds of activities because they're just trying to survive.
Or it's been limited by
what's possible.
Actions or what's possible, right? Exactly. Yeah, because it's difficult to get on an airplane and to go places. And not everyone lives near a ski resort or,
Yes. Yeah. And certainly that, I mean, by the way, when they shut down the resorts last year, the ski resorts last year, and I
didn't stop the hardcore skiers.
Well, I mean, there was backcountry stuff, but over the summer, we built rail parks in the dirt and built dirt ski. Oh, by the way, you want to try to learn how to slide rails in the dirt in your 50s? You want to talk about pain? Yeah, oh my God. Imagine. I was just cut to shit all summer long, but I wasn't giving up.
I bet you that made you better when you got back on the snow.
Yeah, well, the goal was, a big part of resilience is you take the loss and you turn it in, you reset it as a goal for the future. Right. And so I had been working very, very, very hard to get to last March. Basically, I had a big project that was, over last March, and I really needed time off, and I was going to ski for 2 months. And COVID happened, and I had to decided to do what everybody else did. I had a whole company to help save and all that stuff, and I got no time off, and it was really bugging me. And I was like, okay, how do I turn this into a win? I was like, well, if I can enter next ski season better than I ended this one, I'll call it a win. And what does it take? And so I created an entire action plan around that, and it worked. And it's been it's been fun. There's been a lot of progress this season now that I've been back on snow. And I did manage to get better over the summer, but it was incredibly painful.
I bet it was. So as we begin to link curiosity to passion, how do we then bring purpose into the equation? How do we use passion to help us inform purpose?
So we have to pause and talk about a couple of things this is not a spiritual commentary. This is a biological commentary. Like, why are these things good? Because they get mystified a lot. Passion and curiosity and passion and purpose are great because they give us focus for free. There's not a whole lot of levers in peak performance. There's the action you're going to do, and there's your attention, right? And that's the thing. That's the whole thing. And the action you're going to do is going to take the energy it requires to do the action. And you can get more efficient. You can get better at the things you do over time, slowly. But in the moment, it's not so that you can really work with. Focus is your big lever, right? The brain is 2% of our mass, 25% of our energy at rest. So if we can lower that energy requirement, that's a big deal. And curiosity, passion, purpose, this gives us focus for free. Neurobiologically, curiosity is a little bit of dopamine and a little bit of norepinephrine. passion is way more norepinephrine and dopamine. Once you get purpose, you attach that passion to a problem greater than yourself that you'd like to see solved in the world. It may sound very high-minded, but you get 3 or 4 more of the pro-social feel-good reward chemicals that massively boost motivation. It's an incredibly selfish thing from a peak performance standpoint. And for flow, more importantly, flow requires you to dial back your ego, meaning the prefrontal cortex gets really quiet. When you have in flow, you have task-specific, non-ego oriented attention, right? It's focused outside yourself on the task at hand. Purpose gives you a little more distance from that ego as well. So it may sound high-minded, but and from an evolutionary standpoint, passion, curiosity is a quest for resources, right? Passion is also about resources. Purpose says, oh, dude, you've got passion, so you've got enough resources for yourself. Now it's time to go help your tribe, your species. You're right, get more resources. That's all you're talking about from a neurobiological standpoint. But literally, in the passion recipe, once you've sort of cultivated, found the intersection of multiple curiosities and played there for a while, I have people make a list of 10 huge problems in the world that they would love to see solved. And then look, where does the intersection of my curiosities, my passion, attach to a cause greater than myself? That's your purpose. That's how you do it. And there's a couple things that are worth pointing out because people screw this up all the time. For example, when I say, hey, you know, people think about passion and let's say talk about athletic passion and they see LeBron James like coming in for a thunder dunk over some poor defender's heads in the finals. And they're like, that's what I want. I want that passion. And you forget, and everybody forgets when they start to train this shit up, that's late stage passion. That's not, or early stage passion is a little kid in a driveway throwing a basketball through a hoop. And it feels that way. So when you start cultivating passion, don't expect it to feel like that, you know, thunder dunk passion, because you're not there yet. You have to, passion and purpose are earned over time through devotion to task, right? You can cultivate them, but they're not, if you go seeking a feeling that you're identifying in somebody else and you're like, I want that, it doesn't work that way, right? You have to, all this stuff, and this is, in the end, this is what people hate about peak performance. But in the end, I think for people who have been doing this a long time, this is what we learned to love, is it all works like compound interest, right? It's a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, a little bit the next day, a little bit the next day. And the huge results are months and years and years. And you are totally right. You can shortcut the path to peak performance, right? The 10,000 hours, even Anders Ericsson, the late Anders Ericsson, who was just a great, fun man, said, you know, 10,000 hours was Malcolm just wanted a number, right? And so he picked he picked 20-year-old violinists as like his number. If he would have picked 30 years old, they would have had 20,000 hours, right? So like, and, you know, and certainly, you know, even Anders has said, like, there are certain disciplines, memorization. You can get to expertise in like 500 hours, 400 hours, like really fast. And, you know, some military skills, for example, riflery shooting is something that can be massively accelerated for sure. And we've got, you know, evidence of that. So there are certain things that take a really long time to learn, certain things that we can pick up quickly. But what my point is, in the end, when you look back on the things that really make you deeply satisfied and really made a difference in your life, it's never the easy stuff. That's not the stuff we're proud of. That's not the fuel that keeps you going. That's not the stuff that makes you happy. You know what I mean? If I do this with people all the time, they're like, oh, I want it now. I'm super impatient. I'm like, stop. Think about everything that you have in your life that you truly treasure, right? That made a big difference in your life that you actually treasure. And did any of it show up overnight? And you know what I mean? Nobody, you know, somebody will, every now and again, somebody will say, well, I got on this bus and I accidentally met my wife. And I'm like, well, is that the thing you're proud of? Or are you proud of the 10 years you put into your marriage to get to where you are now? Because nobody's proud of the random encounter on the bus. You're proud of, oh my God, a marriage is a hard thing. And I put 15 years into this relationship. You know, that's what you're proud of. That's what changed you.
This is such a difficult thing for most people to grasp, this idea. And ironically, it is one of the aspects of Patanjali's 8 limbs in the disciplines is contentment. And the idea is to be content with the way things are now, but he didn't mean you're not striving to be, more.
Well, you have to, I mean,
a better person, or to have more in your life.
You have to be striving, because basically, look, we don't live in reality. We live in a reality that's shaped by two things, predominantly from a neurobiological level: your fears and your goals. Mm-hmm. That's the world we live in, right? That's what actually filters our experience. And if you're not moving forward towards something, your fears will win. That's just the biology of the equation. There's nothing we can do to change that biology. You can do a lot of breath work and meditation to ignore it. And that will eventually, you can detach from it. And we know what that looks like in the brain as well. But as a general rule, the system is designed to move towards things. That's why, Andrew Huberman talks about this. When we're moving forward, literally the act of moving forward diminishes fear, right? It raises parasympathetic response and lowers sympathetic response.
One of the things, I know we got to wrap up soon, but one of the things that
I could talk to you all day. We could do this forever.
I know, it's fascinating, and I love this stuff. I have a lot more to say about contentment, but we're just going to leave that.
Yeah, so do I, by the way. I will tell you, by the way, that it was, my wife and I were joking about it, because last summer I walked up to her. I was like, honey, I'm feeling something on the inside. It's this, I don't know, it's like a calm lake. I think they call it contentment. I'm not even sure what the word means. Yeah. I've never experienced this before. Like, are we sure? Do I need to go to a doctor?
I know, it's awesome. Well, I think it's an outcome from my perspective of training both the extrinsic and the intrinsic aspects of your being. And so
I agree with that.
And so kind of like and this is what I believe this yin yang symbol was alluding to, right? The yin is kind of the interior, the receptive, learning, expanding contexts, perspectives, aligning with purpose, vision, passion, curiosity. And then that translates into the exterior doing, which is the yang. And so then these, as you astutely put out, these provide ultimately kind of an almost instantaneous feedback loop, like an infinity loop between the two. The interior informs the exterior, and that's flow, and the exterior then provides feedback to the interior. That's the OODA loop. But contentment is found when you're living right on that edge, and you could call that presence. You're not too much in one or the other. You spend time in both. But
it's interesting, because the thing that I was always a little afraid of contentment, surrounding these kinds of emotions, because I thought, like, I'm not done yet. You know what I mean?
Like, and I mistake it as completion.
Right, exactly. And I didn't want to I never want to lose my fire. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing that like keeps me sane. And no, it turns out that like what contentment means is you just lose a lot of the other nonsense.
Yeah. You get really, really present. And the metaphor image for me is the Zen Master, also samurai or monk, who's just content. He's content to sit on his bench. He's content, if someone sneaks up on him, to leap into action and, wield his sword in self-defense. And he's content if it's his last moment, right? Because it's enough, right? He is enough, and what he's had in his life, the experiences are enough. That's a powerful way to live.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm at I don't know if I've had enough yet.
Yeah. Well, I know what you mean. I'm not sure either. You know what I mean? That's why I know I'm not quite there.
Yeah, I like everything you're saying, but I'm like, I get that. But like, if you came to me and said, okay, dude,
it's your last moment.
You're up.
You're
like, shoot, have I accomplished a great, maybe, but I'm definitely not done. I don't even feel like I'm started.
Getting warmed up here.
This is the book 12 is the one coming out today. And I really feel like I'm just getting started.
Well, congratulations on that. That's really quite an accomplishment. And I know it's going to be huge. The Art of the Impossible, is that the website? Like Art of the Impossible.com?
The Art of Impossible. There's no second Yeah. By the way, everybody, this is not just you. Everybody has done this. Apparently, I screwed up, and there should be a second "the" in the title because nobody can say the art of impossible. Everybody's like the art of the impossible. I'm like, no, I left out that second "the." I'm sorry. This is
less is more, right? Less
fucking with language again.
The art of impossible. I love it. Well, that makes sense because impossible is, well, it's impossible to understand. So we're not going to.
Well, so let me
fix it by saying
let me clarify those terms in the last seconds that we have, because I think you'll just jive with it. It's a book. It's lessons absorbed from people who have accomplished capital I impossible, right? That which has never been done. But it's really meant to be used by anybody who's going after what I call lowercase I impossible, small I impossible, that which you think is impossible for you.
For you, yeah.
Right. And the point is, I've met tons of people who've actually accomplished capital I impossible, probably more than anybody else alive, I would guess. I've been in the room because I've sought it out over and over and over for 30 years. Nobody who's done that started out trying to go after cat. They start out, you go at like lowercase I impossible. For me, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I wanted to be a writer, right? Like it's a blue collar steel mill town. I don't know any writers. I don't know how to become a writer. It was like I woke up one day and said, Mom, Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to be an elf. Right? Like that was the extent of like how I knew how to become a writer. That's the lowercase I impossible. There's no clear path between where you are and where you want to go. It's statistically not the best odds of success. Overcoming trauma, rising out of poverty, becoming world-class at anything, becoming a successful entrepreneur, getting paid for what we love. These are all lowercase I impossibles most of us have to solve. I think the first lowercase I impossible most people solve, they don't even realize they solve, which is how do you get your first kiss, right? You're 10, 11, suddenly you're like, oh my God, I'm attracted to people. And you like want a relationship, a kiss, or a date, a something. And how the hell do you do that?
Yeah, that's a game of spin the bottle. So I didn't have to put a lot of work into that one. Unfortunately, it taught me that life is just spinning the bottle. You know, it's all a big gamble. Just kidding.
Let's not read too much into this, shall we?
Awesome.
I don't think I can't top spin the bottle. I think we should end there.
I'm good with that. We'll end there. What's next for you though? Are you going to take another break and do some skiing?
I am going to take. I'll come up from air from this launch will go through April, right?
Right.
Yes,
big deal.
I will. So I have a novel coming out next November. That's already done. I tend to write novels for fun in between the big, hard think books.
Oh, yeah, I could see that, like decompression a little bit.
Yeah, I write cyberpunk thrillers. They're fun. They're cool. But I'm going to take some time off. I'm writing a very big book on intuition, which to me is the last uncharted wilderness of human peak performance. And there's a lot of cool science. But literally, like, the top two shelves right behind me, the 1 and 2, those are my to read shelves, and those are all books that one way or another are related to intuition. Nice. So when I'm through those and I've done all the interviews that are on the other side of it, I'll write another book, but it's going to be a little while, I think.
Right. Okay. Well, good luck with that, and good luck with this book, The Art of Impossible.com, and of course it'll be available everywhere books are sold, I imagine.
Yes.
Do you have any like pre-launch specials if people go to the website?
Yeah. So if you go to the art of impossible.com today, I think we're going to run it for a little while longer. We're giving away like $1,500 worth of free peak performance training from the Flow Research Collective. So nice. Okay. This is really, it's actually, thanks for asking. I've been doing a lot of pre-sale campaigns over my life, and like, I've always wanted to give away the best shit ever. And it sort of helps to have a company. It helps to have some stuff that you can actually. This is the first time I finally am like, yes, this is really $1,500 worth of badass stuff you get for a $30 book purchase. So, awesome. Yeah, it's cool. Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, it's awesome, Steven. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate you too. maybe I'll see you on the slopes up in Tahoe.
Yeah, you let me know if you're coming this way.
Yeah.
If you want to come up and poke around and there's still snow, I'd love to get a day and that'd be super fun.
I agree with that. I'll let you know. Thanks.
I got a whole Navy SEAL posse of skiers we could put together.
Yeah,
yeah.
Let's do it.
It's the one time I can kill you guys. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I don't know many SEALs who shredded on the slopes. I know they're great in the sky and they're great in the ocean, but
all right.
I grew up on skis, though. You'll have to know. I grew up.
One time out, I took a friend, Brian Ferguson, who I'm sure you probably know, mountain biking, downhill mountain biking. He'd never been down biking, and it was a posse of like, I'm the odd guy out. Everybody else was like an ex-pro, whatever, and I'm the odd guy out. And Brian's never been DH riding before, and I've never seen anything like I was like, whatever they did to you SEALs, it's fucking crazy, because he literally was on my ass until he took like a 300-yard fall, one of those spectacular falls I've ever seen.
Because we have no fear. We'll just go straight down until we wipe out and be like, oh,
exactly. None whatsoever. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen any human being do, because he was like on our butt for like 3 laps until he really wasn't.
That's awesome.
It was amazing.
All right, buddy. Again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you too. Bye-bye.
All right, folks, that's Steven Kotler. Thanks for being part of the Unbeatable Mind podcast. We really appreciate your support and your attention, and for being part of the solution to make the world a more positive place and to evolve. Check out Steve's book, The Art of Impossible, at his website, artofimpossible.com, or you can just Google him and check him out on social media and whatnot. Until next time, stay focused and be unbeatable. Hoo-yah.